Hello again, and welcome back to this ongoing discussion and adventure that we're having on the idea of paradise, or what my vision and idea of is paradise. And you can be having your own personal discussion and talk with your partner or friends or loved ones or whatever about make videos. I highly encourage everybody to make your own videos on your vision of paradise, your ideal paradise, just as I am now. But for this video, I'm just going to take a little pause sort of from our discussion of paradise and do another what I call spiritual potpourri or spiritual musings or whatever. And also I wanted to mention, whenever we use that word spiritual this or spiritual that, I am kind of hesitant to do that, but I still think it's worthwhile to use that word because whenever we put labels on things, we've got to be very aware, conscious of what that label means to us and why we're using it. So when it comes to so-called spiritual things, a lot of times we call ourselves spiritual people or not spiritual people, but sometimes the most spiritual people never refer to themselves as being spiritual or in a spiritual clique or group or whatever it is. So that's just something to consider whenever we use terms like that. But anyways, I just wanted to do 3 things in this spiritual potpourri. And the first thing was to talk just briefly about this union of the divine feminine, divine masculine, or what some call hero in the Gnostic tradition called hieros gamos, that sort of thing. Now, if you've never heard of that before, then I encourage you to look it up on the internet, some information, do a little bit of research and see what I'm talking about. But it comes up in some of these spiritual groups or more esoteric online communities. And what happens sometimes in some of the groups is that it becomes all about the inner. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that that isn't the primary or that's the most important part. It is. It happens on the inside first. It truly does. First, notice I use the word first. So some teachers might really emphasize the inner part, and that's maybe all they talk about. They don't give any credibility or honoring to anything outside. But here's the thing. When did that whole idea of the inner and the inner and the outer, the as above, so below, as within, so without, all of those, that very, esoteric but very well-known mystical knowledge, when did that just kind of get thrown out the window in favor of just the inner and not the outer? So as above, and then it's just above, or as above and no below? I don't know. So where does the above end and the below start, and vice versa? So these are all the kinds of ideas and questions that you need to consider whenever we talk about these kinds of things. Because what often happens in these so-called spiritual communities is that, oh, we're so above the physical and everything, and we're not a part of the physical, we're just up in the etheric and all this kind of thing. Well, guess what? It's very possible, and in fact there's people like Ismail Perez, who I'm going to talk about in a minute here, saying that we in fact have physical bodies right up until the 9th dimension. So we might as well get used to having physical bodies and physical sensations for a long, long time, if you're a believer in time at all, but in a linear sense, time. And so there's going to be this experience of the inner and then on the outer plane. So it happens on the inner first, and then we get manifestations of it outside of that. but is it really outside of you? I don't know. You have this experience that you categorize as the outer or external, and then you categorize these experiences as the inner, but where does one start and the other end, and all this kind of thing. So you see what I'm getting at is we make these strong distinctions with things, but it's not in a vacuum. It's a continuum. It's a balance. It's all enmeshed together. All the dimensions are here right now in this space right now, intermeshed. They're overlapped each other, just in different vibrations. That's all. So the gods are having sex and the mere mortals are having sex. And as above, so below. So let's just get over our hang-ups and get, whatever baggage we have when it comes to sex and all these other things, because it is what it is. It's just a manifestation of this union that's going on. And ideally, yes, it does matter how you go about it and the reasons you go about it and all that kind of thing. I'm not saying that there isn't a difference between, let's say, lust and love, or lust and love making, let's say, for instance. So I just wanted to touch on that quickly. Another thing I wanted to talk about was, as I mentioned, Ismael Perez. He's, all of a sudden he just came out of nowhere a few months ago, and he's just on all these different platforms and programs and you name it, like everybody's interviewing and all this kind of thing. So I think that's really interesting how he has a role right now, and I'm not going to try to explain everything, what he's all about. I've talked about him in other videos, and I'm reading his book right now, Our Cosmic Origin, and I recommend. So far it's I would say very worth reading, and it's a way to connect dots that you might not have connected. So by listening to his story, just don't attach too much to anything. Don't attach too much to his vision or story, but don't attach to any story, including your own, too much. Just kind of take it, and say, oh yeah, this part kind of resonates more with me or whatever. But he's really serving an important role right now at this point in our evolution, by getting people more excited and thinking of and connecting dots with what's going on the planetary and geopolitical scale and all that kind of thing, social, and then tying it together with these more what some people call woo-woo or whatever ideas, and all the alien stuff and extraterrestrials and our star family and how all that ties together. He's serving that role right now in order to get people more prepared, humanity more prepared for eventual first contact and becoming more of a galactic civilization rather than just here on this planet. Okay, and then another person I wanted to say has got a very important role right now in a different but related way is Jordan Peterson, or Dr. Jordan Peterson. And I'd also recommend listening to some of his videos and talks, because what he's bringing forth right now, and he's on a lot of different programs, but more mainstream ones, is he's on to, or I should say he's on one of the main stages right now on the world scene, because he's bringing this more of a really level-headed, philosophical, extremely intelligent approach, a philosopher kind of, very much a philosopher approach. I mean, I think he's technically a psychologist or something like that, but he's a doctor of psychology. But he's bringing a lot of these, like, really almost like commonsensical, logical, very logical, calm. Let's think calmly about things, and but in a free thinking kind of way. And so that's sort of his role right now, is to get people, and I mean, Ismael Perez is doing that too, to get people more free thinking, but his is just like blowing people's minds like altogether. And then in a free thinking, like getting people to imagine what's possible and what's really going on. And then Jordan Peterson is also blowing people's minds, but in a lot more methodical, logical, like, this is what's happening, and this is sort of the ills that are happening on our planet, the corruption and all that, pointing it out. And just, he's not conforming, and he's really about, like I said, level-headedness, and not being afraid to talk about what's really going on, like to get past all of these, taboos or political correctness. So he'll mention that in his videos, and talk about how, being politically correct is not good in a lot of cases. Yes, we need to be polite, but also not always political correct. So anyways, I wanted to continue the video by talking about one more thing, and that was, if I remember, the third thing was about, sorry, just give me a minute. It's about something that I call the limitation in limitlessness, and the limitlessness of limitation. So I just want to finish off the video by mentioning that if you think about the gods, let's say the gods up in Mount Olympus, or wherever they call it, Valhalla, or all these places, where the gods are beyond us mere mortals. And a lot of us would think they have this perfect, idyllic lifestyle that we can't even imagine how beautiful it must be, and perfect, and beyond us. But that's not actually very accurate when it comes right down to it. That yes, it would be very beautiful and divine and godly, or goddessly, if that can be a word, but in so many ways it would be beautiful beyond our imagination. But at the same time, there is a form of limitation in that limitlessness that they have, because they have a lot more power and control over what is happening in their lives, what happens to them or through them, however you want to see it. But they, because of this power that they have in control, they are unable to experience things that we're able to experience, us being mortals. And that is, experiencing what courage is, because we're more vulnerable with our physical bodies, whereas, say, their bodies are a lot more invulnerable. So we have to think about that before we, say, go into a certain engagement, or whatever it is, rush into a burning building to save somebody. We're going to have to consider, our mortality a lot more, whereas they would just, like, it'd be a piece of cake, and so they don't have to be courageous. So you could apply that to all kinds of things, are going to be that much sweeter for us because of our mortality and limitations. But then there's obviously great advantages and awesome things about being a goddess or a god, that I'm not trying to belittle or anything or make light of, because really, when it comes right down to it, being a god and being a mortal is not any better or worse, either one. They both have their benefits, but it's just that they're not able to grow and expand in the ways that mortals are, because they're sort of there already, or past that. So that was about it, what I wanted to get at in this video, and we'll continue on with our discussion of paradise and my vision of paradise in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and keep following along, and the highest love to you. Thank you for listening.